Hello, this is Rodrigo from Frame Freak Studio, and this is the Creative Hustler Show. And today I have an special invited here. This is Blaine Dix. He's a cartoonist from Disney, and he's going to be here telling us about his experience now. So, welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, the first question that I would like to ask is about your history. Like, how did you get started into the art industry, into doing cartoonists, and obviously, how did you get to Disney?
Mm-hmm. There's a long process to a long answer. I had moved to Hawaii when I was 18 and was working with an organization out there that did humanitarian aid and missions work throughout the world, and had met a friend of mine there who worked at Pixar. And while I was there, I had always been drawing my whole life, and finally got to sit down on his lectures and ask him some questions. And just out of curiosity, I asked him to look at my sketchbook, and he encouraged me to do it, is kind of the short story. So I kind of jumped in on it pretty quickly. I went to school in San Francisco, which I started a year later. And then about 4 years after that, I got a job at Disney Interactive, and then we got laid off. And then after that, about 4 months later, I got hired at Disney TV, and I've been there for the last 2 years. Oh.
Awesome. So, one of the things, what really got you, like, what made you think, like, yes, I'm going to be like a cartoonist for life?
I didn't actually think I was going to be. I had in high school decided that I wasn't going to be an artist because, there's certain things that we say, such as like a starving artist. I like food too much to ever consider art as a possible career. So I had decided in high school that I wasn't going to be an artist in any form, and instead decided I was thinking I was going to study cooking because I like food. And after high school, none of that ever happened. I realized that I didn't like cooking for other people unless I could share the meal with them, and didn't really know what I was going to do with that until I turned 19, and that's when I met Matthew Lunn, he was a story artist at Pixar, who had encouraged me to maybe consider it. But I had drawn my whole life. Since I can remember, I've been sketching, I've been drawing, I wasn't a very athletic kid, so I spent a lot of time inside just kind of filling my own world with things, because we moved around a lot, so finding friends was difficult, and team sports just wasn't my cup of tea. So drawing was a bit of an escape, and it eventually became a job that I didn't expect to have.
Nice. Yeah, definitely I can relate to that, because especially here in this country, like, where there is actually a lack of industry in creative areas, like, there is a lot of people who are like putting a lot of pressure, like, what are you doing art? Like, you're not going to earn anything doing that. But
Yeah.
now with the internet, like, we can tap into a lot of
Yeah.
opportunities, and
Yeah, there's incredible resources now.
yeah. So, what would be your input for people who are out there, like, receiving this same type of advice, like, you're going to be starving, like, you're not going to be able to feed yourself if you're an artist?
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer, because some people, I would never say that being able to draw is a talent. It is a skill that can be learned. But thinking like an artist and being aware of what you're seeing and how to interpret that as art is oftentimes what people view as, I think that's where maybe where the talent comes in, is just the way that you view the world is going to affect the way that you create anything. So with that in mind, I would say that anybody who wants to do art needs to essentially put in the time and effort to learn the skill, and put in the time and effort to try and develop the way of thinking behind it. Understanding why things work, and why characters are appealing, and why backgrounds are appealing, and why colors harmonize well together, and having to understand all of that is really important. So if you want to be an artist, expect to be a learner more than a draftsman. Like I said, anybody can learn to draw, but not everybody knows how to think about it. And if you're not hungry for learning, if you're not hungry for studying the subject matter of the time period of the film that you're working on, the people groups of the people of the films you'll work on, the costume choices, of the time period, there's so much content, the history of the culture that you're dealing with, developing a history for a culture if they've never been made, or if they've never existed. So it's a lot more about the thinking, and it's a lot more about the places where you draw inspiration and knowing why you're making those decisions, that ultimately makes somebody who knows how to draw well draw effectively and differently and new, and then they will become a successful artist because of it, because they're doing something that is based in stuff that they've studied, but then can then turn it somehow to make it interesting and new. So being an artist isn't, I guess ultimately it comes down to being an artist isn't a lazy job. It's, if you want to draw, great, draw. By all means, have fun. But if you want to be an artist that gets paid for being an artist, be a student forever. Because ultimately that's the thing that's going to set you apart. That experimentation, that struggle, that desire for something different, the getting bored with things that are already done, or the things that you've created so often, that you can't get stuck in one style, you can't get stuck in one genre, you can't get stuck, because the reality is that there's so much to learn from, that hunger to learn is going to be the thing that ultimately sets you apart. So to encourage anybody who would want to be an artist, I would say learn how to learn first. And then if art continues to be the thing that you're most hungry about, then pursue that, because it is difficult. But at the same time, if you do fall in love with the drawing and interpreting those things that you've learned as well, then by all means, you're well on your way to becoming a great artist who will be successful. That's a really long-winded answer for a very short question, but if anything, it's always going to come down for me to being hungry to learn more, to trying to understand how everything fits together, either historically or mathematically or chemically. You start picking up weird things that you find interesting, and then somehow they influence the things that you create because you have the means to create. And then on top of all that, while you're learning how to study, and while you're studying and trying to figure everything out, you have to be drawing constantly. If you're not drawing or painting, then you'll never gain the control of your arm and muscles and interpreting what's in here onto paper. Sorry, in here being your brain, in case this is only audio later. So it's a worthwhile struggle. It's a worthwhile thing to shoot for. Just understand that it takes a lot of work, but anything that's worth doing takes a lot of work. So if you think it's going to be too hard, and if 10 years is too long to get somewhere, then maybe animation and art isn't for you, because the reality is that as an artist, you never stop being one. I fully, if I'll eventually retire from Disney, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to stop creating anything. I can't go to a cafe and just sit there because I get bored and my hands get fidgety and I have to do something. So building that lifestyle, building that repetition and that desire to put what's in your head down on paper because of what you're studying, what you're looking at, what you're bringing in through your eyes, needs to become a regular part of your life. That was a broad topic. I'm sorry.
I actually understand very well this. There was a time where I was like studying art. Like that was the first thing I studied. I had to drop out because of financial reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But now in the industry, I find out like even though there is people that I met who has like amazing, let's say, technical talent, which they can create amazing pieces of art. They are not good at working as a team because they lack everything that you just talk about. Like it's so weird for me to see artists who, in other areas of life, they are so open-minded to be
Mm-hmm.
so close-minded when it comes to how they do things,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like no, there's much more than that, and just pure method, and like you say, it's not good just to hold on to a single method and try to force it into the world when we should be
And I mean,
taking the world.
there are certain people who their method develops over time. Like we were studying with the interns. We were studying Ronald Searle, which to me, he's a phenomenal draftsman, and he has this ability of drawing things that are ugly and appealing at the same time. He knows how to do, like, it's not that it's grotesque, it's just it's unashamedly ugly with the knowledge of how to be appealing. It's incredible. But then looking at the body of his work, because he was drawing well into his 90s and had been a prisoner of war during World War II in the Philippines, and just decided during the war that when he was imprisoned, that he was going to start drawing and become an illustrator then. What made him think that was the moment, I don't know. But if you see his progression from those drawings, from drawing in a place of war and drawing in a place of essentially just horror, and then becoming this very funny, very bright and comical artist, but still having this grit and this edginess to his drawings, and then seeing how he progressed over time, and you realize that he's referencing things as well. And now, as animation people, we can look at Milt Kahl and see specifically where he was pulling from Ronald Searle, where they were pulling from, Quentin Blake, and like all of these illustrators that are phenomenal that essentially have influenced each other. And you can see that progression because they find things in each other's work that they like, and they try and understand why it works and try and break it down. And that's that trying to break things down, that trying to learn, trying to figure it out, that makes their work stand out so well, is because they understand why you can do something that is cartoony, that isn't realistic, which is arguably ugly, but somehow works. And it's that little bit of growth that changes things. It's fun. Yeah,
definitely. And also I found that the industry itself, like the whole animation industry, they focus a lot maybe on the social thing, like seeing, because we have to admit that there is a lot of talented artists out there who are like too weird for a job. And I've seen that there is also this focus on the social part, and seeing if you're actually a human being that can adapt into a team. And
being a kind, like, ego doesn't go very far in animation because it is a team effort. So when it comes to creating anything in a team, if you're so pompous, if you're so overly confident about your own work that you're putting down other people's work, or saying that it's only your way that's available, then you're not going to get very far. If you start cutting other people's work down and saying, oh, well, this is wrong and this is bad, rather than building them up and trying to like teach each other so that you can grow as a team, then you don't get very far. And ultimately teams break up and shows don't get made and things go past deadlines and people get hurt, and it's not worth it. But having a humble, sort of teachable personality is oftentimes a wonderful thing. And generally speaking, I mean, I've met my fair few people who I would say that, you know, there are egos that go about, but for the most part, the people in this industry are just as excited to be making cartoons as you are. You know, everybody's just, all right, let's do it. This will be fun. We're going to make it happen. And yeah, it's hard to keep like that level of enthusiasm for 3 to 4 years on the same project. But ultimately, like, if you're going to get mad about anything, can you really? Because you're making cartoons. You're making things that are funny and for people, well, not always funny, but the things that I like to do are funny. Yeah, like being social is a good thing, and being like learning from each other is only going to improve everybody. You know, there are things that other people do far better than I do that I am constantly trying to learn, because I see my own flaws. I see where I struggle, and I know, you know, I know where I can grow. And so I look for people that I can learn from, and oftentimes just asking them, you know, how they did that or why they made that decision makes a huge difference into the next drawing that you do. Even today, I was meeting with Bobby Pontius and a bunch of the interns, and had him go over one of my drawings because I was struggling with it. And it was really great information, just because there's so much content to learn that ultimately, in the end, you need to be reminded of certain things that you can just forget. You know, you get so stuck in a routine of drawing hands a certain way or heads a certain way, or, you know, that you forget basic drawing sometimes. But it's useful for that. Being social is extremely useful. Plus, most of the people that you're going to get jobs from are people that you meet along the road of trying to get into the industry.
Nice. Then, what is something that you feel is not being talked about too much about in the animation industry in general?
Oh man. What's not being talked about? I don't know. I mean, it depends on the subject. It's a very broad question, because there's a lot of different ways that can be answered. I mean, there's certainly issues that we'll all come across when it comes to political hierarchies and, you know, studio execs and, you know, money versus art and all those sorts of things. And I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I think animation is one of those fun places where there oftentimes is a voice, or someone's putting a voice to something that hasn't been spoken about yet, or some sort of greater truth that hasn't been dealt with yet. Like, I think Inside Out it's not my favorite Pixar film by any means. I think it has some problems, but I think it's really successful at getting people to speak about their internal emotions and what they're feeling in a way that has a tangible, real understanding for everybody now. I think like the ability to talk about feelings in a way that little kids can understand, and have little kids, like children, be able to tell their parents how they're feeling and try and figure out how to find a solution, rather than, you know, since they have a visual representation of what anger is and what fear is and what joy is and what sadness is. So that's important. And I think animation does that well, of like finding these places of allowing for conversation, or allowing for some sort of catharsis to happen for people. You know, Up is great for teaching about loss and sort of moving on with life. Toy Story 3 is great about teaching just letting go and moving on with life. You know, Finding Dory is the importance of family. Finding Nemo's the importance of family. And those are really great things. But even then, each scene has its own little thing. Ratatouille has its, you know, it's about striving for something that you're passionate about. So I mean, for me, that's to me like one of my favorites. But as far as what animation isn't talking about, I mean, even in the sense of like other types of families, like parents with homosexual parent or kids with homosexual parents, and different sorts of relationships that are, you know, of the same gender or different genders or whatnot. Like Loud House is doing that very well right now. Steven Universe is doing that exceptionally well. The idea of a family that isn't the standard atomic family of you know, a wife and kids, a husband, wife, and 2.5 kids, and a white picket fence. You know, so I'm sure there are subjects that haven't been touched, but I think as far as the industry is going, it's in a rather healthy place of allowing for conversation to happen and making that the subject, making difficult subjects available to animation it seems to be a more common thread now than it ever has been. If so that's a really long answer to say, like, I think that there are things that haven't been talked about. I can't think of any, but I think animation is currently in a good place to tell those stories because they're doing it already with things that are very progressive.
And what about the industry itself, like as an experience as an employee, as an artist inside the corporation? Because I see a lot of people who are like having this fantasy that they are going to go to Disney or Pixar and everything is going to be just rainbows and creation. And they are not thinking about marketing and money, as you say, like money makes art.
Yeah, I mean, the show that I work on is like, it was made to sell merchandise. Like, I work on Sofia the First. Originally, the purpose of that show is to sell merchandise. It's on for preschoolers. The parents of preschoolers buy the most toys out of any demographic. So why not have a princess show that introduces little girls or little boys to other Disney princesses, and then in turn allows them to then go and watch Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and, you know, Beauty and the Beast, etc. But the nice thing is that on our show we also have writers who really care about the characters and are using it as an opportunity of teaching good parenting to parents of, you know, 3 to 10-year-old children. So while that, yes, there are assignments that I'm given that are like, hey, make this. It's also, we need to make a toy out of it, so keep it sort of like in a certain realm of design so that it can be manufactured for, you know, eventual sale. And that's fine. I mean, the reality is that in order for these shows to exist, in order for movies to exist, we need to sell things so that we can keep financing the ability to make these things. So I wouldn't even say that it's a necessary evil. I would say that it is the reality of it's the reality of life in a lot of ways. Yeah, it's the reality of life. I mean, in order for an economy to keep moving, product needs to get made, and for innovation to happen, those products need to be sold so that money can go into invention. So, you know, it's the reality of life in a lot of ways, and I'm not bothered to create content, you know, for a project that I actually genuinely, you know, believe in or think has good morals. So like, yeah, I'm working on the show that I'm on. Like, I'm aware that the things that I'm making will be sold as toys, and, you know, there's a huge part of Disney that needs to make a lot of money, but simultaneously it also allows for animation to continue. It allows for it allows for stories to be told, and it provides a voice to people who want to have an impact, but it also, you know, it comes with its own thing. I mean, call it selling out if you will, but, you know, we got to support our families too in some ways, and, you know, at least we get to do it in a place, at least I get to do it in a place where the writers are telling good stories, you know, for the medium that it is, in order to be an aid towards families that may not have some sort of structure or may not have a voice to instruct children on kindness and sharing and, you know, being generally good people. So, you know, sort of enforcing parental teachings as well. And as far as like, yeah, there are places where, you know, you'll always find that there are places where the workers get taken advantage of for the sake of the company making money. But for the most part, Disney, I've not seen that in Disney. They treat us, in fact, incredibly well. I mean, maybe they have to because we have a union that sort of forces it. But at the same time, it's like there's extra things involved. Like we get to go to Disneyland whenever we want, and that's really nice. And it's a nice place to work. I think part of it is also that within animation, for the most part, it's run by people who have worked in animation. There are other artists. So like my executive producer, our directors, all used to be artists at some point. So when it comes to leading a team and being understanding, like I'm being told how to do something by someone who has more experience than me in the thing that I'm doing. So it's not like I'm being told by some executive, well, you can't do this. You have to change it to this because of this reason. I'll be like, but design is good here and design is bad when you do it this. But the reality is that there's a really good buffer between, you know, the corporate side of things and the artist side of things. So I really haven't come across any real struggle that I would find with that. Now, some of the older generation of people that I've worked with, they can have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because they also lived through you know, Disney shutting down 2D animation completely and sort of really feeling shafted and not taken care of. And you know, the reality is that progress means change, and if people don't want to change, then that's kind of a problem. So, you know, they allowed for all these animators to learn how to use 3D software, and a lot of them chose not to. Now, with that said, I am terrible at 3D, and I can understand that struggle. But the reality is that if I had an option to stay, I would figure it out. Because the reality is also that, you know, there's progress. Things are going to be made differently and done differently. It doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's wrong. Doesn't mean it's good or bad. It's just different, and you can either embrace it and learn, or you can be stubborn and get left behind. So, and maybe that's just me being young and progressive and not in their shoes, but simultaneously, it's, you know, they also could have been treated a little bit better, but bottom line was bottom line in the end. Yeah, I don't really like, there's not a lot of gossip. Like generally working in animation here is really pretty nice.
Awesome. And also I wanted to ask you, as a cartoonist, which will be a challenge that you will put somebody to do every day so they can improve their level of art?
Oh man, it really depends on what kind of artist I'm talking to. Like if someone wants to be a story artist, I would either have them do gesture drawing every day. There's great websites that if you just look up gesture drawing app on Google, it'll pop up, and Pixel Lovely is one of them. And you can set time periods and do just 2-minute gesture drawings for an hour a day. And that's gonna help you loosen up and start to, you know, don't give yourself enough time to get into the anatomy, but give yourself enough time to get the full character acting of the moment that you're drawing. That, or I would say look at, like, put on a movie every night and then pick a scene in the film and just like thumbnail out how it's like how it's edited and how the shots work, and understanding how the shots are organized to affect a certain emotion and feeling, and doing that. If it's somebody who's doing design, I would say try and find somebody, like find a new artist every week that you like, or that maybe other people like, but just find another artist and find the things that are working within their work, and imitate them until you understand them, and then start trying to incorporate that into your design decision making when it comes to drawing your own character. So maybe, like, I'd say spend a week where like an hour a night you're studying from one artist and trying to figure out you know, what it is they're doing right. And then on the last day, on like Friday, I would say take an hour and design a character trying to use what you've learned. And I think that should be helpful. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. I mean, and if you're a painter, if you're doing background painting or viz dev, take like on your lunch breaks, just take a little, like, I don't know, take some paper and some watercolors out and try and paint what's around you, like forcing yourself to understand lighting and what you see in front of your face instead of just trying to come up with it in your head will eventually build that library of understanding on why light works the way it does, or, you know, how it's reflecting and why the colors are blending the way they are. That's going to eventually later influence the speed in which you paint, because you already have done it by actually observing it. Like, you don't have to fully figure out why it's doing that until after you've painted it and then look at it and go, oh, that's why it's doing it there, but that's why these colors are mixing the way they are. And then later you'd have that opportunity to use what you've learned. I mean, ultimately it just comes down to like taking time building your craft somehow. You know, if it's drawing for storyboards, draw quick and loose and effectively. If it's drawing for design, draw beautifully and learn why it works. And then if you're, you know, a painter, then learn, just paint, study life. That's really all I can say. Like, I don't have any one thing. It's, like I said, it's kind of broad. It's you have to focus on like the things that people are interested in learning.
Yeah, and also I wanted to ask you about, do you have any favorite resources online where you can go and learn to improve your art? Like, for example, Chris Otley, Stephen Silver, YouTube channel, things that people can go online to improve themselves.
I mean, I follow a lot of artists, and they're a constant like place of inspiration. So for me, like flipping through my Instagram or like Googling artists because I'll remember something that they did. Yeah, I don't have any one specific place. Google. I use a lot of Google. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as far as like opportunities to learn, I would push people towards the Animation Collaborative that's based out of San Francisco. They do incredible work. They've got solid teachers that all either worked at DreamWorks PDI up there, or they work at Pixar at the moment. It's hard because you can learn a lot online, and it's great, but until you put like pencil to paper, it's hard to internalize what you're learning. So going to figure drawing classes, I think, is more effective than drawing them on the computer, because you're forced to look at a model in 3 dimensions, and the model's changing and the pose doesn't always stay the same. And so you make adjustments for it. But as far as, yeah, I mean, Chris Oatley does a great job. Imaginism does a great job. I don't know, reaching out to people on Tumblr and Instagram and Facebook and just asking them if they could look at your work and not being offended if they don't respond helps a lot. Yeah, I mean, maybe I feel like I might just be privileged with the position that I'm in, that if I have anything that I want to learn, I can usually go directly to the people that do what they're doing so well that I want to learn, that I can just ask them directly. And maybe that's not necessarily an option for everybody, but you know, it's worth a shot. I mean, people have reached out to me, and I've definitely, you know, I try and help as much as I can, and you know, as long as you're kind and patient with me. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot. There's so much out there. I mean, Gnomon workshops as well. I mean, nothing's gonna do as much good as just sitting down and doing it and then drawing. But, you know, it helps to have someone that you can send your things to that can be some sort of mentor and essentially critique your work and tell you where you've gone wrong and show you why you did it wrong. But that's a harder thing to find. And if it's, I mean, that's often expensive. So I'd say, like, if you can find a group of friends that you can be brutally honest with each other, that'll be just as beneficial as long as you're both, as long as you're all hungry to learn it together. It's a really long answer.
Yeah, actually, this one, the last one that you just mentioned is hard, because even in groups of entrepreneurs that I've been, like, I've been going like for advice for, let's say, a project that I've been working on. It's like, guys, I need you to be brutally honest with this. If you see something bad, please let me know. Like, I'm truly trying to improve this. And I found that many times that this voice of politeness, I don't know, is hard.
It's really hard to break out of that. And I mean, even with us at work with the interns, I mean, it's a struggle sometimes to critique, because you don't want to destroy people, but at the same time, the only way to grow is by, like, I don't know. This is an old, like, saying. I think it's a biblical one of, like, if the wine, like, if you have a broken wine pot, you break it, you soften the clay, and you rebuild it. And you can only accomplish, like it can only be fixed once it's broken. So if they're aware that it's broken, if you show them the hole, if you kind of crack it a little more and go, here's the problem, and then they're forced to fix it, then they'll learn why to fix it. But it's hard to find those people. I mean, I have a few people in my life that I will be completely brutally honest with, but they're also the kind of people that understand that when I'm being honest about their work or their ideas, it doesn't mean that I dislike them. It doesn't mean that I don't respect them. It's just that I want good for them. I want them to be effective and more effective and better than where they're at, just as I expect myself to grow constantly and always sort of be improving myself, that I respect them enough to be brutal. But I mean, then I also go, but hey, I love you. I'm gonna give you a hug, and then you sort of make it better. But you know, that unwillingness to break someone down for their own good, it's hard to do. It's really difficult. But finding those people that you can be that honest with is really important. Particularly, I mean, if you can find that group and build a team that can make they can make a show or an animated short that is just that brutal with each other, but still incredibly loving and affectionate with each other, you're going to be an amazing crew. Because the reality of the situation is that nothing will be taboo. Everybody can hold each other accountable and force everyone to do the best of what they can, because they know that they're being told out of a place of affection and not out of a place of ego or cutting someone down. So it's a hard balance to find, but, you know, I mean, that's generally life, though. I mean, finding friends that'll be brutally honest with you to, like, tell you when you're being an ass is not the easiest thing in the world. So I don't know. Eventually, I mean, that's kind of the goal. Everyone wants to work for Pixar, Disney, and the reality is that once you start working, it's more about the people that you get to work with that makes the job the best job or the worst job you've had. So, I don't know. Honesty is the best learning.
Yeah, it took me like 3 years to get like this group of 5 people who I know that I can go like, look, I want to do this perfectly. Like, check this out. Please destroy it. And they actually go and destroy it. Like, oh, this is bad. Like, I don't like this font. I don't like this design here. You should change this. And I know, like, they are doing it for my own good. So,
yeah.
But it took time, because it took so much time, because I went like that. Like, hey guys, like, please review this. Please know that I want you to be brutally honest. If this looks ugly, please let me know. And they were like, no, it looks just great. And it's like, I know that it doesn't look great, but I don't know what's
Yeah,
missing.
you've been looking at it so long that you can't see the flaws anymore, and you're like, it just looks wrong. Why does it look wrong? I don't know. I've been looking at it too long. And then when people go, oh no, it looks great, it's fine, go on. You're like, but no, it's the worst.
Yeah, but definitely worth something worth finding, like these people, like at least 5 people that can be able to do that.
Yeah.
Also, do you read books?
I did and I didn't. I do a lot of like skimming of books, which is probably not the greatest thing. I find that, I mean, and it's mostly because of the way that I learn. Reading is great, and when it comes to things of like, I don't know, when it comes to things like drawing, reading is great. Like, you get great theory, but until you put it into practice, then it's ineffective. You can understand why a design works, but until you try and make a design work by hand, then you'll never quite understand really how effective good design is. So I'll skim through, and then I'll find drawings or images that I find super effective. And rather than imitate that, I'll do variations of what I'm seeing, so I can try and understand the way that it's structured, how they balance the shapes, how, you know, the use of texture works, and why that's effective. Or I'll take a class with somebody who's teaching me that will sit down and actually draw over my drawings and tell me why something is working or not working. That to me is more effective because it forces me to do it. But with that said, whenever I do teach, I do hear myself saying things that I have read and go, oh, that's what it meant. So I have a bit of a backwards way of going about it. I will read, but it never solidifies until I'm either doing it or teaching something, and then eventually saying the exact same thing that I've read that I never fully understood. But like the Walt Stanchfield books are fantastic, the Drawn to Life ones. I took a gesture drawing course with Alex Wu that changed everything, and he had learned from, essentially it's the Walt Stanchfield method of drawing gesturally, which is very much focused on the performance of what you're drawing more than the design of it. So that I feel like that's allowed for me to push my character designs because I understand the movement and the emotion I want the character to feel. And then I try and influence the design off of the most effective gesture. Because if a character is extremely sad and mopey, then there's certain lines within a gesture that I'm going to use that I eventually will go and enforce that gesture with the shapes that I ultimately use to design the character. And Stanchfield is great for that because he teaches you to understand the mental state of every character that you're in and how to interpret that in the body motion and movement and sort of posturing. I'd say he's the most effective book I've read when it comes to understanding character. And even drawing. I mean, I was super technical before I took Alex's class and studied that method, and it's liberated me in a lot of ways that nothing else could have done. It broke me out of trying to get this perfect line and make sure it was not wobbly anywhere, and it just flowed really nicely. And now I'm sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum, where now my lines are too flowy, they're too rhythmic, and so my characters are too rhythmic, and then which in turn makes them impossible to animate unless you're doing something that's very stylized. So now I'm having to go backwards and reteach myself proper structure and volumes, and finding that happy place in between that allows for extreme expression, but also great polish and design. And that's, I mean, yeah. So I'm trying to find the place where I can learn that at the moment, and I'm finding that just going to figure drawing helps a lot because I'm forced to look at muscle structures and all that. I'm a practice makes perfect sort of person, so I don't have many more books to offer than that.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for the recommendations. Also, something I wanted to ask you. I see that you are very active when it comes to social media, in Instagram, in Facebook, and all these things.
Yeah.
What recommendations can you give about using social media to promote your art?
It's interesting because I get asked this question a lot, and the reality of my social media presence has never been one to gain followers. I just happen to be lucky enough to have gained as many followers as I have. Because I won't say never, but I've rarely ever posted anything that I've done for work on my social media. Mostly because I'm not drawing, like what I draw for work is for work. It doesn't have, like, I'm not in it. It's a design for someone else, written by someone else, and I'm doing my best to interpret that. Whereas what's on my Instagram and Facebook and all that, is things that entertain me. Like, it's a place for me. Like, when I first started using Instagram, I decided that I was just going to draw and I was going to post it, even if I didn't like it. But if I found it funny, then that was the most important thing. Or if I thought it was a good drawing, then that was important. But it forced me to make drawing such a regular part of my life, because now there was an expectant audience. I was never doing it to gain an audience, and I didn't start with many. Let's be honest. It wasn't like I jumped on and I had 1,000 followers. It was like, that first 1,000 took me a year to get, and then 3 years to get to 5,000, and then suddenly the last 2 years it's gone crazy. But the reality is that anything that I draw, it's meant to entertain me. And I figure, well, if it makes me laugh or if I enjoy it, then other people must as well. So for me, it's just a place of like, hey, here's a funny drawing that I did, or here's something that I did that I think looks cool. And so I've used it more as a way to encourage me to draw more, because I need to set that routine in my life to push me to grow. But I've never once felt burdened to post more than once a day or to post more than once a week. Now, there are days that I post like 12 things, and then there's like a week where I'll only post one. And, having a regular, if you want followers, I figured it out a little bit, but using hashtags, I try and limit myself to 5 because I don't want to be annoying. Posting, I would say I try and post once a day. I try and give myself an hour to do something for myself when I'm at work, because I need that. I need to, get out of my head a little bit. And so I use that hour to come up with something. Oftentimes it's that I'm trying to learn something, or there's a story that I'm interested in, or my friend Aaron, who is very funny, we come up with silly nicknames for each other whenever we greet each other in the morning. And so oftentimes they become stupid drawings, and it's something to keep me busy. It's something to keep me active. Yeah, hashtags are kind of the best way to get followers, and posting regularly. But ultimately, I feel like the audience often can tell when you're being insincere. And I try and always stick to being sincere. If I think something is funny, then it's going to get posted. And if I'm posting something because I want followers or I want people to like it, then that's never the right reason for me. And I feel like there's people that I've followed that I've eventually gone to unfollow because they've either lacked sincerity in their drawings, or their growth stagnates to a point that all I'm starting to see is the flaws that they're never fixing. Whereas the most interesting people, it's the arc, it's the journey that you get to go on with them through the process of their creation. And that's sort of my motivation is, you know, I'll never delete anything for the most part, unless it's extremely offensive accidentally, which has never happened, I think. But, you know, I feel like it's a good chronicle of the journey of my life. And that's, you know, if anyone wants to watch, then great. But really, it's there for me to enjoy and have a place to put it.
Awesome. Also, I would like to ask if there's any advice you would like to give to people who want to become, to make art as a living, that you think that is not being given away like too much.
I mean, ultimately, it comes down to wanting it enough. I mean, nobody becomes a professional athlete by just like doing the bare minimum. Not that I'm at any caliber of being a professional athlete, but you know, I really enjoy drawing. It is actually fun for me. And I think that's the best motivation. I know a few people in the industry who are really sick of drawing and they don't want to create art ever again. And I go, and in my head, I'm going, you are privileged to have a job that most people would kill for. And they're incredible artists who understand lighting and form in a way that I only hope to one day. But, you know, maybe it's that their responsibilities are far different than mine. But if you don't want it enough, if you're not hungry enough for it, then don't, I hate to say don't waste your time, because you need to figure out if it is something that you are that passionate about. But it is a struggle. I mean, it took me, I didn't start at Disney until I was Disney, like proper Disney animation, until I was 30 years old. And I was, you know, I started college at 21. So it was almost 10 years to the, like, it was 9 years that it took me to make that journey. So, you know, it takes time, it takes effort. And if you're not willing to put it in or like figure out if it's worth it, if you figure out that it's not worth it, then don't put yourself through it, because you'll just end up depressed in the end. But you know, and that's why like the Instagram thing works for me, is that it keeps me motivated, it keeps me positive, rather than constantly beating myself down. I try and make myself laugh.
Nice. Yeah, I also hear a lot of people saying, this is more in the entrepreneurship world, like that you need to be passionate about what you do, not because that of the world being all this good, but because you're, whatever you choose, you're going to find like a lot of problems. Like whatever path of life you choose, you're going to find a lot of problems, and especially the ones where you want to do something that is not so common, you're going to find even more problems. And the only way to go through all those problems is actually be having passion about it. Because
yeah, I mean,
it's not an enormous person.
Why? It's the motivation as to why you're doing it. You know, if you're doing it because you want to prove that you can, it's effective. But ultimately, once you've accomplished it, then what? Like you're left with this empty void of like, well, you've accomplished the greatest thing of your life to prove that you can do this, and then you're left with just yourself being able to do this. And like, you need to strive for something. You need a motivation to try for something greater or something different. Now that can change. I mean, some people that does work. I mean, I have friends who just felt like they needed to prove themselves and do it, and then they were able to walk away because they did it, and then they found other things they were passionate about and studied that. But I think those people were people who had learned to be hungry for knowledge, and so therefore they just moved on to another interest of theirs. Whereas others, you know, there's I don't know, it's funny. There's different motivations. for me, it was that I like good stories. I like telling stories. I like making people laugh, but I also, I don't know, maybe it's that there's a bit of a performer in me, and it's a place that I get to perform, you know, with silly doodles and sort of be funnier than my normal self is. And I enjoy that. And I enjoy sort of bringing people together in one sort of common place for a moment of joy or a moment of thought or a moment of discussion. And I like that. And animation provides a really great venue for me to do that. And I also enjoy drawing, except like a whole heck of a lot. So it provides that option for me. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of reasons why to and why not to, but ultimately it's like, if drawing makes you happy, it's probably going to make other people happy, and that's ultimately a good reason. Like, bringing joy is a good reason to do it. It just does take a lot of hard work to get to a place to be able to do it effectively. I don't know if that's any good reason for anything, but
I will say it is. Any last advice that you would like to give that we haven't talked in this interview yet?
Don't take yourself too seriously. I get messed with a lot for having a lot of like fart jokes and bodily function humor. But the reality is that it is funny. Everyone will laugh at it. And, you know, if you want to be an artist, limiting yourself to only the highbrow, like I'm not disgusting with my drawings, because to me that isn't funny, that's disturbing. But if you want to be an artist, you know, limiting yourself to what your moment of thought is when you're deciding on like what kind of artist you're going to be. The reality is that your lifetime as an artist is it's going to change. Your motivations are going to change. Your sense of humor is going to change. Your passions about what you observe in the world is going to change. So if you think like stupid things are funny, run with it. Like, it works. It's the reason that most jokes on like Cartoon Network land so well, is because they're stupid humor and they are effective, but then they're also wrapped up in this wonderful bow of really good storytelling. So, you know, being an artist doesn't have to be doom and gloom and self-hatred and being mopey. Like, if you're an artist, then be joyful about it. Like, enjoy the process and enjoy the journey of it, because ultimately that is what it is. It's a lifestyle that you're choosing to live rather than a career. So don't take yourself too seriously. I think that's the best advice I can give.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for giving all this time to us and giving all this advice. I've learned a lot. I know that the people watching this interview are going to learn a lot from this as well.
I hope so.
Thanks
I
a
hope
lot
it's
for
not just
being
me
here.
rambling for 20 minutes. Or an hour.
Okay, so this was the Creative Hustle Show with Blaine Dix from Disney. And I hope that you have enjoyed this interview and learned a lot from it. So until next time.
Yeah, thanks guys.